This is the part of the gardening season that really makes it all worthwhile, when you start getting your first vine-ripe, homegrown tomato. There's nothing to compare with it. Now, if you remember, we went through several different training methods for tomatoes in our tomato patch here. This was our first one, just letting the tomato plants sprawl out. And as you can see, there are quite a few tomatoes there. There's also, they have done just that. They have sprawled all over the place. It's difficult to get in. The foliage has opened up, and a lot of those tomatoes are now open to full sun, and they will be subject to sun scald. So even though it is a low maintenance and sometimes you can get good yields out of it, it does have its problems. Moving further back, you won't be able to see it very well, but this was our small wire cage. And really, it is too small for these tomato plants. It's grown up through the cage, and then the plant has gotten so big, it has grown up, set some fruit, and is now falling over. And many of these fruits inside, they're out exposed to the sun. We've even got a little bit of sun scald on this one from where it's been out, exposed to the midday heat. Now, you can either use bigger cages, or in this case, as those shoots were coming up, such as in this case, start cutting them back so they don't sprawl out and still keep foliage to cover up the middles. We get back to this one. It's one of our larger cages, and it's still doing a pretty good job of maintaining those tomato plants up off the ground. You still, with all of these cages, need to be watching out for these side branches that come out from below, and you need to keep weaving them in to the cage to keep them growing inside and keep them from sprawling out and getting in the pathway. The other problem with the cages, which I mentioned before, is that I can see through a little crack that there is a ripe tomato right down near the ground level, right in the middle of this big wide metal cage. If you have these cages, it sometimes gets difficult to find and harvest your fresh ripe tomatoes. But as you can see, it's doing a good job, much better than the sprawling method, of keeping the plants up off the ground, keeping the fruit off the ground. Our steak tomato hasn't done as well as I would have liked it to. We had a problem with our tying materials, which let loose, and as you can see from the mud, it fell over in the rain, got down into the mud. We've retied it, and we hope to keep it staked better to the stake. One thing you'll notice is that the plant is quite small. The pruning needed to keep a tomato trained to a stake is such that your plant will be smaller. It won't yield as many tomatoes, but as you can see, if you have a small garden, this is probably an ideal way of training tomatoes, because you can use vertical space with a minimum of square footage ground area and still get tomatoes. Our stake and weave, we've added our third set of strings. You can see it's kept it to a nice, narrow foliage. We don't have any that are sprawling out. We've got good foliage cover for our fruit. We can walk into our aisles very easily. And on our cattle panel weaving, again, as long as you can keep up with weaving these stems in and out, you can keep it to a very narrow strip of foliage, keep the fruit up off the ground. You do need to keep after it, though, before the fruit gets too heavy. I mean, 'cause as of now, it's impossible to get this woven up in there. Try and keep your shoots woven in there before they get down on the ground. But still, all in all, it has worked out very well for us. Our peppers are doing quite well. As you can see, they're doing very well. Beautiful, big, husky plants. They need all of this foliage to provide protection to the fruit and keep it from getting exposed to the sun. We've had one here that's fallen over, and where it's been exposed to the sunlight, you can see some very severe sun scald. Now, as we get into summer, the hot temperatures and the drying winds, the peppers and the tomatoes will stop setting fruit. Keep them watered, keep them going, and in the fall you'll have a very good crop. On the peppers, if you put up some sort of windbreak to protect those flowers from drying out, you can sometimes get a good summer crop. But even if you don't do that, keep these plants alive, and they're just going to come on real strong next fall and give you an excellent crop, one that you probably won't believe.